Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, hope you've all been doing well. In this video, we'll be going over some in-game graphical options for Call of Duty Modern Warfare that you can tweak yourself in order to attain the best performance for your gaming PC. Infinity Ward recently released Warzone, which is a free-to-play battle royale mode that's become quite popular, and I must say it's quite fun. Over the past few weeks, as we all practice social distancing, I've been spending my time playing this game mode a lot, and it's very enjoyable. I did also post a video back when the Warzone mode was released, showcasing performance on my gaming system, which has a Ryzen 9 3900X 12-core processor, 16GB of DDR4 memory clocked at 3666 with 2 CL14 timings, and an RTX 2080 which is water-cooled and overclocked. For the most part, I can say the game is pretty well optimized, with most of the graphical options set to max or high, with things like motion blur and VSync off for obvious reasons. I was able to achieve an average frame rate of around the low to mid 100 FPS range. Outside, I noticed that the frame rate would be around 120 to 130 FPS. This is mostly due to the fact that there is so much in the field of view for the player, longer draw distances, lighting and shadows are more intense. You have to view all the buildings and structures. When inside buildings, houses, and other structures, it can be observed that this frame rate would jump into that high 130, low 140 FPS range, since there's not much really going on apart from having one enclosed area. Now, if you have a system like mine, or with similar specs that is, this performance isn't bad at all. You can definitely be able to experience smooth gameplay for the majority of the time. Now say you don't have a system with high-end hardware, you're using entry-level or mid-range parts, but want to attain a high frame rate and maximize your system's performance, or you have a high-end parts but you have a high refresh rate 144Hz or 240Hz monitor that you want to take full advantage of and leverage using a consistent high frame rate. I'm also a user who plays with a 144Hz monitor and would ideally want the highest possible frame rate in a competitive shooter like COD, so pay attention as I will be showing you guys what settings to use in the graphics menu in order to boost your FPS and maximize performance without sacrificing too much visual fidelity. Now when you launch up Modern Warfare, you want to head over into the settings menu. There will be multiple tabs that have categories relating to various options such as controls, audio, graphics, and more. You want to click on the graphics options. Here is where you'll find all the settings where you can tweak in order to boost performance. Starting from the top, the first option you'll have is display mode. You want to set that to full screen and not windowed or borderless, as running the game full screen should provide the best performance and provide the lowest frame times, whereas running in windowed can sometimes cause stuttering as it might conflict with your desktop or other background apps. For the display monitor, this is really simple. Choose the monitor that you want your game to run on. My XL27300Z is my high refresh rate panel, so I'll be going with that. Display adapter settings pertain to which graphics card is in your system that you want to be using to render out the game. As most of you will only have one single GPU, just choose that one. As for screen refresh rate, set this to the maximum you can to match your monitor's refresh rate. So if you have a 60Hz monitor, set it to that, or if you have a 144Hz monitor, then set it accordingly. As for render resolution, you want to keep this at 100 so that the game isn't internally rendering at a higher resolution than your monitor's native resolution, which can then cause lower performance, and that's something you definitely don't want. You also can set this lower, which should help in theory if you really need to, but this is really only useful for people who have very low-end systems, so I would say keep it at 100 and you should be fine. Aspect ratio can be set to automatic if you don't know what yours is, but since I know that 2560 by 1440 is a 16:9 aspect ratio, I've manually set that to mine. VSync is an option I always recommend you turn off. What VSync does is basically it syncs the game's frame rate to the monitor's refresh rate in order to provide stability, thus getting rid of stuttering, microstutters, and tearing. While it sounds like a positive effect, it can introduce input lag, and that is something you definitely don't want to experience in a fast-paced first-person shooter like this, so I recommend you disable it. Following that option, you have a custom frame rate that allows you to set specific parameters or limits to maximum and minimum frames per second. I recommend choosing unlimited, as the higher the frames per second you can get, the lower your input lag will be and smoother the gameplay is. However, if you're trying to remain within a certain range because you're using an adaptive sync capable monitor, such as one with FreeSync or G-Sync, then you can set it accordingly. Another reason why you might want to set it to something that is within a certain range is so that it doesn't exceed your monitor's maximum refresh rate, and to lower down thermals of your PC components. NVIDIA highlights is something I recommend you turn off, as it basically allows the game to record certain events automatically, like when you get a kill, if you have NVIDIA Share turned on in the background and have instant replay enabled. The reason why I recommend turning it off is because when you're recording gameplay in the background, you do suffer a performance hit. It's nothing dramatic, maybe about 5% or so at most, but if you're trying to maximize performance, it defeats the purpose. For display gamma, you can set this to whatever you like, as it doesn't impact performance in any way. Now moving on, we'll be tweaking the details and texture settings that will make the biggest overall impact to your game's performance. First up, we've got texture resolution. You want to set this to normal if you have a fairly capable PC. If you've got an older system with lower end hardware, you can set this to low, but I found that setting it to normal still retains good visuals and gives a nice performance increase. For texture filter anisotropic, it allows the game to provide better rendering details on flat surfaces like ground and landscapes. I actually found that setting it to low provides a good balance between apparent visuals and boosting performance, because in a first-person game like this, you're going to be more focused on the stuff that's going to be happening around you. And I actually found that enemy character models also pop out a bit more in the distance. So in turn, not only do you get better performance, but you can spot enemies better. Particle quality can also be set to low. It just makes things like fire and embers look less detailed, which you're hardly going to be noticing anyways. For bullet impacts and sprays, this has no impact on performance, but I recommend keeping it enabled since you can see where someone might be shooting you from, and sprays can actually be used on people in the gulag. And if you're matched up with some of their character models, they'll actually pop out more. Just a nice little trick to gain an advantage. For tessellation, you want to set this to near, as this will still retain all the relevant details for buildings and structures that are around close to you, but lessen the details of buildings that are further away that aren't necessarily relevant to you, which will help save resources and increase performance. Shadow map resolution can be turned down to low. This will help boost performance quite drastically without really impacting shadow quality too much. For cache spot shadows and sun shadows, if you have a GPU with loads of VRAM, you can keep this enabled, as it will allow for shadows to load up faster, but it does hog up a lot of memory buffer, so use it accordingly. Particle lighting can be left to normal. It's not that much different than the max settings and provides a nice boost. Ray tracing, it should go without saying you definitely want to keep this disabled. While ray tracing makes shadows, lighting, and reflective properties look lifelike, it's a huge performance hog. We're talking about, anywhere from 30 to even 60% of a performance hit. If you're playing the single player campaign, sure, go ahead and max everything, as you're not really playing competitively, but for multiplayer, maximizing performance over visuals is definitely the way to go. Moving on to the post-processing filter section, there's a lot of stuff in here which you can just go ahead and disable. For anti-aliasing, however, I recommend using Filmic SMAAT2X, as I found it's the best solution to get rid of jagged edges, which I found to be very annoying, especially in a situation where you're watching corners or you're mounting on something on an angle. For depth of field, you can disable this, as it basically provides this soft overlay on most surfaces on a distance, which I found to be very ugly. Filmic strength, keep this at 1, then disable world motion blur and weapon motion blur, since during high-paced motion it unnecessarily blurs everything around you and honestly just looks hideous and is counterproductive when you're trying to watch your surroundings. The last option is film grain. Just turn it down to 0. There's really no reason to have a grain pattern covering your screen. It's distractive and negatively impacts the game visually. So those are all the settings I recommend you use in order to achieve the best performance in Modern Warfare and allow you to run the game with a higher frame rate. I use these settings as well, and doing so easily allowed me to gain a solid 20 to 30 FPS increase. Now it might be weird hearing me say this, because as someone with a 12-core CPU and RTX 2080, why wouldn't I want to take advantage of high settings when I've got high-end hardware? I personally think that for single-player games, using max details is more appropriate, as you're not competing against other players. If I can get above 60 FPS, then I'm fine. But in a game like Call of Duty, when I want to be able to take advantage of my high refresh rate monitor, get the highest frame rate, it's actually really crucial that I lower down settings or use normal settings so I can maximize my performance. So using normal or low settings is totally appropriate, as you can then really push the hardware to pushing out tons of frames over, rendering out visually. And I'll be honest, while I did notice a difference visually, it really wasn't anything too dramatic, and I got used to it very fast and think the game still looks very nice, despite so many settings being turned off or lowered. Now, if you're still struggling to improve performance further, then definitely check out my video where I go through tons of steps to optimize your gaming PC, both from a hardware and software level, for every game. So that concludes my guide on how you can optimize Modern Warfare so it runs smoothly on your system and still retains nice visual for your enjoyment. Let me know your thoughts down below. Check out the video description for my other videos, and if you're interested in more content like this, then hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.